A lot of people have heard that on July 1st, 2026, the trade deal binding the United States, Mexico, and Canada either expires or comes up for renewal, and most nod along without knowing which one it is. The deal is the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, the pact that replaced NAFTA in 2020. The date is real, and it is written directly into the treaty. However, the popular shorthand that the agreement ends that day gets the mechanism almost exactly backward. July 1st, 2026 serves as a scheduled checkpoint, the first test of an unusual clause that no previous American trade agreement ever contained. This checkpoint involves the USMCA sunset clause and the July 2026 joint review, along with the specific triggers written into the agreement. Headlines and supply chain briefings routinely call this date a deadline or an expiration. While that framing is common, the documented terms of the agreement tell a different story. Understanding this single sunset clause explains why businesses are uneasy and how the agreement could remain in force for a decade beyond this summer. July 1st, 2026 is the date of the first joint review of USMCA. It falls on the 6th anniversary of the day the agreement entered into force, which was July 1st, 2020, when USMCA replaced NAFTA. The review functions as a scheduled decision point. On that day, the trade ministers of the three countries convene, and each government states whether it wants to continue the agreement. The rule driving this process is Article 34.7, the Review and Term Extension provision. This was the first time a United States free trade agreement included such a provision. The agreement is written to terminate 16 years after it took effect, which is July 1st, 2036, unless the parties actively confirm they want it to continue. Reaching the 2026 checkpoint triggers a confirmation process pointing to one of two paths. On the first path, all three governments confirm in writing that they want to extend. The agreement then renews for another 16-year term, locking in stability through 2042. The clock resets, and the next joint review falls in 2032. Under the second path, the three governments do not all confirm renewal in 2026. In this scenario, the agreement stays fully in force and continues under its existing term to 2036. However, the 6-year review cycle is replaced by annual joint reviews. This annual process can run for up to 10 years. The pact only expires if the three parties still cannot reach an agreement by July 1, 2036. A separate exit door exists under Article 34.6, which allows any party to withdraw on 6 months' notice. This requires a deliberate decision by a government rather than a trigger from the calendar. Essentially, July 1, 2026 marks the potential start of a 10-year countdown toward the treaty's actual termination. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this story or finding it helpful or entertaining, please subscribe and hit the like button. It helps bring more stories like this to the channel. Since the deal remains in force past 2026, the real anxiety stems from the fact that the review reopens the terms. Analysts expect the United States to withhold a clean renewal to press for changes, while Mexico and Canada aim to preserve the existing framework. The documented run-up supports this. The United States Trade Representative opened public comments in September 2025 and held hearings that December, later telling Congress he was not prepared to recommend renewal without changes. Renegotiation targets include tighter automotive rules of origin, along with steel and aluminum. Bilateral negotiating rounds in Washington, D.C. and Mexico City through mid-2026 have covered these issues and broader economic security. These real-world stakes focus on a grueling renegotiation process rather than an immediate cessation of trade. The misunderstanding persists because the sunset clause is new and lacks precedent. The word sunset implies an ending, and warnings to businesses often use the language of a hard deadline, even when the legal effect takes years to unfold. While the mechanism is settled fact, analysts disagree on the eventual outcome. One projection suggests the U.S. will decline the 16-year renewal in 2026, using the annual review track as leverage to force concessions. Another forecast holds that the parties will reach a revised agreement quickly to avoid a decade of uncertainty, as long-term investment depends on a credible commitment to 2036. A third view notes the process may shift away from traditional structures towards a series of bilateral issue-by-issue talks. As of mid-2026, Canada has asked to renew, while the U.S. has signaled a desire for changes. These outcomes remain analyst projections. As of mid-2026, The USMCA remains fully in force. While the July date opens a decision and a potentially years-long review process, the treaty's built-in termination remains set for 2036. Thank you for hanging around until the end. If you want to see more documented deep dives, hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next one.